Hello, I'm Renan Barkana, a professor of astrophysics. I live in Israel and am also American. I have a unique perspective on things. It is now 3 weeks after the worst, most barbaric massacre of Jewish civilians since the Holocaust, and the world reaction has been quite shocking. I believe this all has very deep roots in bad ideas. Many in the West are being brainwashed by toxic ideas in schools and in universities. Some widespread narratives leave people confused and unable to defend our societies from dangerous enemies. If this continues, it will lead to further disasters. We must win the battle of ideas. I'll start with the world reaction to the massacre, which has been morally confused. I'll give just one example. A Harvard-Harris poll in the US from October 18th found the following. The question was, do you think the Hamas killing of Israeli civilians can be justified by the grievances of the Palestinians? 24% said yes. Among young adults, it was 49%. Any such survey in other countries would probably show even worse results. How did we get here? Part of the problem is false information. According to the poll on the question, who do you think rules Gaza? 46% of Americans said Israel. Now, this is an extraordinary delusion. Israel completely left Gaza in 2005, removing all Israeli civilians and soldiers. Gaza basically became a Palestinian state. Israel asked for nothing in return except that Gaza remains peaceful. The Palestinians were free to turn Gaza into a prosperous tourist destination like Singapore, but in 2006, Hamas won a Palestinian general election and then took absolute control of Gaza. Hamas then turned Gaza into not Singapore, but into an ISIS-like terrorist base. They used their GDP and billions in international aid to develop not schools and factories, but terrorist tunnels and rockets to fire at Israel. That's the only reason that life in Gaza is hard. But the appalling support for Hamas arises from factors that go far deeper than ignorance. We have to challenge some widespread beliefs in the current culture before the truth has a fighting chance. At the most fundamental level, a major myth is the denial of free will. There are two versions of this. One is the woke critical theory view that says that the world is divided into oppressors and oppressed, and at least the oppressed have no volition and cannot be blamed for violence. I will focus here on the second version, which is more closely associated with science or atheism. It argues that everything is predetermined, so there is no free will, no choice, and if there's no free will, then no one can be blamed for violence. In this view, people are basically simple robots. The notion is that there is no rational person who can consider different options and decide what to do. This is the fundamental denial of our humanity. As we have seen over the past few weeks, the denial of free will in all its forms leads to denial of blame, and thus the inability to condemn anything, even including Nazi-like killers and people who support them. In this video, I will give just a taste of how to resurrect free will. I'll focus here on physics. For simplicity, I will ignore quantum mechanics and operate within the simpler framework of classical Newtonian physics, which suffices for understanding the heart of the matter. In this view, a human being is a collection of atoms interacting according to physical forces. Our perception actually consists of very limited knowledge and only on the scale of humans. Forget atoms, our senses can't perceive molecules or even cells. Regarding the brain, it's well established that we are only aware of a very limited portion of what goes on in our brains. So at the level of human beings, we do have free will. There's no such thing as free will at the atomic level, but there's also no such thing as a human being at the atomic level. I think a major fallacy that people don't properly appreciate is the confusion of levels. You can look at the world at different levels, from galaxies down to planets, and in human affairs, economics, psychology, biology, chemistry, down to physics. They are all interrelated, but each level of description has its own validity. One level doesn't invalidate another. Also, fundamental properties of one level can be very different from those of another, without inserting anything supernatural. I will illustrate this with an example from physics, specifically from thermodynamics, the study of gases. Within this subject came the first real understanding of how the macroscopic world arises from the microscopic one, an understanding mostly associated with Ludwig Boltzmann, who discovered it towards the end of the 19th century. The example I will give here is temperature. A single atom doesn't have a temperature. Temperature is a macroscopic average measure of a large collection of atoms. Namely, it measures the average random speed of atoms as they move around and bump into each other. If you're experiencing the world at our level, then you really care about the temperature of the air and of various objects. But if you are looking at the microscopic level of individual atoms, each atom just has a speed and there is no such thing as temperature. Does this discovery mean that you should no longer, quote, believe in temperature and you should feel free to touch a hot oven? No, that would obviously be absurd. The atomic view does not invalidate the human level experience, it just provides an understanding of it. It's the same with consciousness and free will. These are patterns or properties within a human brain, a complex neural network that interacts with itself and the environment and is organized hierarchically, with only limited knowledge present at the top of the hierarchy. Free will doesn't exist in the microscopic laws of physics, but we do effectively have free will as human beings. That's the most basic part of what it means to be human. So if you deny free will and think that this idea is a good way to build a society, I hope that world events will wake you up and cause you to re-examine your assumptions. Thanks for listening.